Today, we're talking about building gratitude. So at the moment, it's really easy to think about the things that we can't do, think about things that we don't have in our lives that we wish that we did. And it's also really easy to overlook the things that we still have and the things that we still can do. So when we build gratitude, we think about some of those important things in our lives and how they make us feel. And that can help to restore a more positive outlook. So I'm joined today by Niraj Shah from London in the UK. Niraj, you're a co-founder of Mind Unlocked and the co-chair of Europe's Transformative Tech Lab. And Niraj, thanks for joining me on day 13 of Clear's Resilience Building Challenge.
Thanks for having me. I'm really grateful to be here.
Just to begin with, we're talking about gratitude today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Of course. So as you said, I'm the co-founder of Mind Unlocked, which is a mental well-being company where we take a very research-led and practical approach to help people with busy lives to integrate some of these tools and ideas into their life. And the other thing, you mentioned Silicon Valley's Transformative Technology Lab, who I'm co-chair for Europe. We basically are the catalyst for the technology for mental health and emotional well-being movement. So that's everything from meditation apps to wearables to virtual reality to AI. So I think, these are the two big strands of my life, like technology and well-being.
That's great. Thanks. That's really exciting. I think a lot of us are kind of turning to technology, being in lockdown and being restricted. We're thinking about ways that we can improve our well-being through digital means. So definitely relevant.
Yeah, I think so. This situation is dire. There's no getting away from that. But it would have been so much more difficult 20 years ago without the kind of technological tools that we have, that you and I are connecting through as well. So I'm very thankful we have that.
I was reading an article saying that if this had happened just 10 years ago, how much more socially isolated we would be from each other. It's fairly kind of obvious when you read about it, but we just don't realize we take so much for granted, our connectivity these days. Just on the theme of gratitude then, could you tell us what the main things in your life that you're grateful for?
So I'm very lucky. This comes quite easily to me. Every day when I wake up, the first thing I'm grateful for is the fact that I can walk. And then secondly, that I can think. And the reason I'm grateful for those things is because they were almost taken away from me quite suddenly. At the age of 30, I had a sudden stroke out of nowhere, a very serious brain injury. And two of the things that came out of that is that for a short period of time, I lost the ability to walk and I had to relearn that. And we weren't really sure what the brain effects were going to be. And I've lost some memories, but that's it. I am able to think critically still. So every day when I wake up and I get out of bed, when my feet hit the ground, the first thing I think about is the fact that I can walk. These are things that I very much took for granted. And most of us would, but for me, they're things that I understand how fragile they are, because there was no reason I had that stroke. It just happened the way that it can happen to anyone. Then in the current situation, things I think about every day is the fact that I do have a roof over my head, that I do have food in the kitchen. These are not situations that everybody's able to do, especially in terms of some of the financial hardships. So I'm really grateful that I can even just be at this stage without having to worry about what tomorrow might bring.
Absolutely. Do you think that it's useful to think about loss and what you wouldn't have when we think about gratitude? If you are grateful for being able to walk, reflecting on that period of life where that was a challenge for you, do you think there's always that need to have a period of loss to know what's important to us?
Well, part of my message today is I really hope, and my wish is, that people don't have to have a serious brain injury to realize that these things are gifts. And I think for me, it's less about thinking about my loss and more about remembering that there's millions of people around the world who wake up without the use of their legs. There are millions of people around the world who, long before we had this pandemic, were wondering where their next meal is coming from. I think it's just that remembrance. I mean, the other strand which is worth talking about is that I'm the child of immigrants who came to the UK with nothing, and we had a very modest upbringing. That has always left me realizing that life could have been very, very different. And that's another reason why I don't take these things for granted.
When you think about things that you are grateful for, how do they make you feel? Like, what does that kind of encourage you to do, or how does it influence your thinking?
I think it makes me feel like I have opportunity, because what we're really talking about is the fact that because I'm grateful for all these things in my life, it's a recognition that today I get to do whatever it is that I get to. I get to go to this job, or I get to travel, or, whatever it is, that lots of people don't have those kind of luxuries. So I think it makes me feel privileged. And I think it also helps me to understand how important these kind of practices of gratitude and kindness are in the effect they have on other people. It creates a bit of a ripple effect. For a long part of my life, I wondered, why are people rude? Why are people angry? Once I started delving into well-being and brain function and psychology and all the things that I'm into now, you start realizing that people are that way because they're the ones who are hurting the most. And, that sounds very cliched, but it's actually true. So I don't think I'm so altruistic that I go out of my way to be kind to people like that, but I at least have empathy for some understanding of why they are the way they are.
Yeah, interesting. I think empathy is kind of key, being able to relate to other people's situations before you leap in and judge. So can you tell us about a time when someone did something particularly nice for you, something that you were particularly grateful for?
Yeah, of course. I think lots of people do nice things for me on a regular basis. And I'd pick out a couple of examples because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially during the way the world has changed. The other incident that really shaped my life is that at the age of 14, my father suddenly passed away. And we lost him very, very suddenly to heart attack. And my mother raised me and my brother, two teenage boys, by herself. And it's only in later life that I've realized what kind of sacrifices and strength that took. I think I'm super grateful for that because I know that that's not always what happens in those situations. So I think that's a really big one. And something a little bit more recent and immediate is that I live with my wife in London, but she works and lives in the working week in Switzerland. So she's usually gone, but she's a really good cook. So for the last few weeks, she's been doing all the cooking. I've been eating great food. And I'm so grateful that I'm getting an amazing cook. I think I'm going to have to manage those feelings when I lose that again and try not to get too attached to it.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that before, actually, this idea that we'll think about the people that we live with, we'll think about who's good at what, and we can appreciate their strength. So you spoke just earlier about this idea of like a ripple effect, about sharing kind acts. I suppose you've heard of this sort of movement of random acts of kindness, like buying a coffee for a homeless person. It's one of those things, when we just want to help somebody out and we don't really expect anything back. Do you have any thoughts on that idea of these random acts of kindness for other people?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I'm really glad you reminded me because it's something I'd heard of and love the idea. There's something so fulfilling about doing something for somebody else. So first of all, I haven't done much of that lately. I just totally forgotten about it. So it's something that it's got me thinking about. I think my acts of kindness have mostly been for the people who play some part in my life. So for example, we're fortunate we have a lady who comes to clean our place every couple of weeks. And of course, that's not been able to happen. But we've still been able to pay her. I feel good that we can do that because I know that she's going to be really struggling because she's lost a lot of her business. The important thing when we do these is not to expect anything in return. When we let go of that expectation, it's incredibly liberating because we're not doing it for our reasons. We're doing it just because it feels good to do it. And it feels good to do something for someone else. I think the only one that's a regular one is that I'm quite good at decluttering and clearing what we don't need. We always have a charity bag going. And again, during the pandemic, we've actually found more stuff like that because we're doing more spring cleaning.
I think that kind of brings us full circle to this idea of sort of being grateful for things. And then that really kind of influencing how we're then going forward in the world, how we're thinking about other things that we encounter. Can I ask you, on the theme of sort of being grateful for things, are there any things that you take for granted?
Of course, I'm human. This is the way that our brains work. Our brains train ourselves to go onto autopilot because that's how we survive as a species. So we'll notice something for a while and then it will be autopilot. It's a constant thing where, of course, I take things for granted. But I think, again, I'm in this lucky situation where because the very first things that I do in the morning remind me that I'm lucky to do them, it sets off a chain of events. It's just really about understanding that being alive in this day and age is mostly a privilege. And noticing the magic in the world. And the only thing that really changes anything is action. I don't want to be the one who wish they'd done something. So I think one of the things I've done is I've really trained that as a habit to just leave little trails of thank yous and that kind of thing.
Sorry, tell us a little bit more about that, about those ideas for building gratitude, about kind of making it a bit more kind of obvious in our lives. Like, how can we be a bit more grateful?
So I'm going slightly outside of my sphere here because, like I say, it's a big part of my life anyway. But we look at the booming gratitude journals and people having a daily gratitude practice. And I think that's really important in tough times, because in tough times, it's really easy to focus on what we don't have or what our problems are. And the way that our human brain works is that we get what we focus on. And therefore, if we focus on better things, we'll get more better things. And it's not about manifestation, it's about doing something about it. But if we spend our waking days thinking about what can we do that's nice for somebody else, or what is it that I'm lucky to get to do, then our brain starts thinking that's important for survival and starts doing more of it. And then it starts this ripple effect in this like gratitude circle where it just goes round and round and round. So things that people can do is really simple things like thinking of 3 things you're grateful for and making them really simple things. Like for me, one of them often is just the fact that I can feel the wind on my face. Again, having seen stroke victims who don't have feeling, as you say, the fact that there's coffee in a house and I get to enjoy this. These are simple things. So I think writing them down is really powerful. There's something cognitive about when we write things down, it gets committed more to memory. And what I believe is that if you start doing those things like any other habit in a small way that's sustainable, then after a while, they start becoming automatic and it starts seeping into our behaviors.
That's really kind of interesting. And we've kind of talked a little bit about ourselves and our kind of current situation at the moment. For people out there who are trapped in kind of small apartments, maybe they're not living with, say, partners, maybe it's not so easy to stick your head out the window and feel the breeze on your cheeks. And maybe they're thinking, this is a challenge, I've not got too much to be grateful for. Would you have any kind of advice for people like that?
First of all, I think it's really important to acknowledge this is a tough situation. We can't gratitude our way out of it. That's not going to solve the problems, but it's more about how do we get into a state of mind where we can be empowered to do positive things in our own lives within our ability to do them. The second one is that I think everybody can find something they're grateful for. I think Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, he was a Jew who was in a number of concentration camps during, I believe, one of the world wars. And he had a very famous quote, which was, between stimulus and response, there's a gap. And in that gap lies our freedom. And what he was talking about is that, we have a choice in that in terms of how we're going to respond. And it's all well and good me saying that from my, apartment in London with food and toilet roll and all of the essentials. But when a guy from a concentration camp who survived the worst horrors you can see can say things like that and come out with his mental state intact, that's the guy you listen to. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that everybody's situation is different. Everybody's got different challenges. For some people, it's clearly worse than others. But the only way you go from my situation is really tough to working something like that out is to first get into an empowering state of mind where you can think of possibility. And gratitude is a really good way to get into that, because when you're grateful, you can't simultaneously be fearful. That the two don't live very well together.
That's great. I really like that. That really makes a lot of sense for me. Just think perhaps, what have I got? What have I got around me? And what can I still do? What can I do for myself? What can we move forward with? Or perhaps what can I do for others?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Niraj, that's all we have time for. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Building gratitude and being grateful for things is a good thing in general, but it's especially important in times like these. With restrictions, we tend to think about the things that we can't do and the things that we don't have. But when we build gratitude, we think about some of the things that we do still have in our lives and the things that we can still do, or perhaps things that people do for us. And those are the things which might be automatic in our thinking. We might take them for granted. They're just things that are around us and that we don't give much conscious thought to. So when we build gratitude, we reflect on those things. And that just brings a little bit more positivity into our lives. We think about how they make us feel and how fortunate we are for having those things. So like Niraj suggested, today we're challenging you to think of 3 things that you're grateful for. Think about 3 things that might have happened to you recently or that you have in your life that make you feel good and that you're grateful for in your life. Keep this up every day and try and think of 3 different things. And by the end of the week, see how they make you feel. So you can find out more about today's exercise on our website. The link's in the profile bio.